The Caribbean community Caricom will analyze the impacts of the Covid-19 pandemic in the region and the so-called blacklist of the European Union against several countries in the area. In the United States, the White House Coronavirus Task Force is warning of a persistent and broad spread of COVID-19, and its members urge progressive mitigation measures. In France, a man wielding a knife outside a church in the southern city of Nice killed 3 people and injured several others. Similar attacks took place simultaneously in Avignon and Saudi Arabia. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. The Caribbean community Caricom will analyze on Thursday the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in the region and of the so-called blacklist of the European Union against several countries in the area. The meeting will be held virtually and chaired by the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, Caricom's president, and also attended by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The debate will focus on the consequences of the pandemic for health, financial and economic development of Caricom's member nations, based on the meetings held in May, August and September, so as to harmonize the response to the impact of the COVID-19. Caricom issued a week ago a statement condemning what it really considered as discriminatory and unilateral actions by the EU disguised as fiscal policy and governance, affecting Caricom's members. Rising debt, falling revenue, and an overall decline in the economy were the highlights of the last quarter, delivered in an economic checkup by the governor of the Central Bank of Barbados. Governor Cleviston Haynes said the economic activity during July to September, the period under review, was not enough to stave out of the third consecutive double-digit decline in Barbados' economy this year. For the review period, the economy declined by 18% to record an overall decline of 16.3% for the first 9 months of this year when compared to 2019. However, Haynes remained optimistic about Barbados' economic prospects in the coming months, saying he expected gradual rebound in 2021 and that the growth could even reach a double digit.
It makes it difficult for some of these transactions to be, and that does creates issues for some of those in the international business sector, not all, but certainly those who are operating out of Europe, because some of their transactions may be difficult to complete because you're now subject to enhanced due diligence, and in some cases institutions don't necessarily take the time to find out more about the particular country. They say this country is on the list, we're not dealing with it, and therefore it makes it difficult for some of these transactions to be executed. And if that persists, then the entity may have to decide, do I really want to stay in a jurisdiction where I cannot execute my transactions? And that is the risk that we face with this blacklisting, and that's why it's so pernicious, that it can undermine the overall economic strategy which we have tried to build.
In Mexico, Morena's party's coordinator for Senate, Ricardo Monreal, strongly rejected threats from opposition governors of the Federalist Alliance to break the 32-leader treaty. Monreal warned those leaders do not properly measure their threats regarding a possible exit from federal pact and advised them to decide on agreed talks so as not to close other possible solutions. Those governors guaranteed they will take it as President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's words, who suggested to hold popular consultations so that people can decide whether their states keep on relationship with federal government. On Twitter, Jaime Rodríguez Calderón, leaders of Nuevo León, and Enrique Alfaro from Jalisco, who is leading the political offensive against the national executive, called on the public to carry out the consultation to get out of the pact. In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador responded to a group of 10 opposition governors who threatened to withdraw from the so-called Federal Fiscal Pact. Our correspondent, Eduardo Martinez, has the details.
The distribution of public resources has been equitable and has been delivered on time to the governors of the 32 states of Mexico. This was affirmed by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador from the National Palace.
We give them their allocations on time, so the delivery of the resources is not delayed.
The President has condemned the use of a supposed defense of the state budget to oppose the project he is leading from the presidency and to gain supporters for the electoral process that will take place next year.
If they accuse us, if they accuse the President, they think that with that they are going to have many supporters from the conservative sector.
Governors of 10 states, all emerging from parties opposed to the López Obrador government, formed the Federalist Alliance, with the goal of returning budgets that are not currently provided to the country's states.
But no free, a sovereign state that has a shred of dignity can remain a part of the Federation, where the government of the Republic attacks us, insults us, and takes away what belongs to us.
President López Obrador pointed out that the application of an austerity policy would allow the country's states to obtain more resources. Meanwhile, local authorities claim they lack what is necessary to deal with the health emergency.
The central government left states without extraordinary support to confront the Covid-19 pandemic.
But the Federalist Alliance is only one part of the opposition that has sought to politicize the health crisis.
We see columnists, economists, and social science researchers who act as if they are epidemiologists, saying stupid things in the media, which are controlled mostly by this corrupt oligarchy that was paid. They go out every day to discredit us, to demand the resignation of officials responsible for handling the pandemic.
Despite the camps promoted by the National Front opposed to the President and business organizations such as Yes for Mexico, the President continues to enjoy high approval ratings, according to various polls conducted by private firms.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In the United States, the White House Coronavirus Task Force is warning of a persistent and broad spread of COVID-19, and its members urge aggressive mitigation measures. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said that the U.S. is going into the wrong direction. The task force reports said the cooler weather is a major factor in the increase as friends and families move gathering indoors. It urges states to intensify efforts to encourage mask wearing, social distancing, and avoiding crowds in public spaces. Meanwhile, the dean of the Brown University School of Public Health said in ABC that the United States is not ready for a second wave, and he also said that 8 months into the U.S. outbreak, things were not where they should be. And he warned America to look at Europe, where he said infections began rising again about a month ago in places such as France because authorities were slow to respond. They were not having to take more drastic measures. On Thursday, the curfew declared in the U.S. city of Philadelphia to prevent social protests in rejection of police violence on racial grounds came to an end. The curfew went into effect on Wednesday at 9 p.m. local time and ended at 6 a.m. this morning. During that time, the inhabitants were only allowed to leave their homes to work, seek medical assistance, or vote. With the curfew, authorities tried to stop the social protests taking place since Monday after the murder of African-American citizen Walter Wallace by the police. In this context of the situation, President Donald Trump pointed out that the protests are promoted by supporters of the Democratic Party. And the US presidential elections are only 5 days away, and nearly 78 million Americans have cast their ballots. Meanwhile, both candidates hold rallies in battleground states. The Democratic nominee traveled with his granddaughter to Florida as state polls show Biden locked in a tight race with Trump. According to a new NBC News Marist poll, Biden has a 4-point lead over Trump among Florida's likely voters. The southern state is a must-win for both, as it's a swing state with many electoral votes. The president will also hold a campaign event in Florida this afternoon before heading to North Carolina for a rally. On Thursday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin criticized the United States for arresting 5 alleged Chinese agents charged with involvement in an operation known as Fox Hunt, targeting opponents of the Chinese government. China said that the operation is part of an anti-corruption campaign.
Chinese law enforcement agencies conduct foreign law enforcement in strict accordance with international law, fully respect foreign laws and judicial sovereignty, and protect the legitimate rights and interests of criminal suspects in accordance with the law. The relevant acts are beyond reproach. The U.S. ignored basic facts and harbored ulterior motives in slandering and smearing China's work in carrying out fugitive repatriation and asset recovery. China firmly opposes this. We urge the U.S. to immediately correct its mistakes, fulfill its obligations under the United Nations Conventions Against Transnational Organized Crime, the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, and other international treaties, take on its international responsibilities, and not become a safe haven for criminals.
Firm opposition to Canadian warship sailing through Taiwan Strait during China's National Day holiday, according to Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson Wu Qian. Speaking at a regular press briefing in Beijing, Wu said that China has lodged solemn representations with Canada over the warship sailing issue. Wu also slams Canada's Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan, claimed that the NATO needs to monitor China's actions, as China's behaviors in the South China Sea is quite worrisome. Wu also said that Canada is urged to speak and act cautiously so as not to further undermine China-Canada relations.
With regard to Canadian warships' high-profile sailing through Taiwan Strait and its provocative actions during the navigation, we regard this as an unfriendly gesture. China has lost solemn representations with Canada in this regard. There is no doubt that such practice has made the already difficult relations between the two countries and the two militaries even worse. We urge the Canadian side to adopt a responsible attitude and be cautious in words and actions so as to avoid jeopardizing the common interests of China and Canada and the peace and stability in the region.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that the COVID-19 situation is worrying and people should not have any illusions. The Chancellor also warned that the winter will be hard after she announced the closure of restaurants, bars and leisure facilities for 4 weeks.
We are at the beginning of a cold season, in a dramatic situation that affects everyone without exception. The situation is worrying and we should not have any illusions. Wishful thinking and populist banalization are not only unrealistic but also irresponsible. The winter will be hard, 4 long and difficult months, but it will come to an end. We have already seen in the last 8 months that we can learn together and help each other. That's what it makes to the society different. This solidarity, this sense of community is what it gives us the confidence.
On Thursday, Spanish Health Minister Salvador Illa asked citizens for one more effort in the fight against the pandemic, given the very difficult months ahead as the Spanish Congress debates on the extension of the 6 months of the state of emergency that the government has proposed.
Our proposal is to extend the state of emergency for 6 months, that is to say until May 9th. The proposal also includes that the government, through the person who is speaking to you as Minister of Health, should report on the situation to this Assembly every 2 weeks, and that the regional governments should be called upon to do the same in their respective parliaments as authorities linked to the state of alert. From an epidemiological point of view, the reasons for its approval are fully justified. The pandemic situation was at the time of the creation of the alert state and remains at a very high risk today. We are fully immersed in the second wave of the pandemic. The government is aware. We are aware that citizens are getting tired of months of effort and sacrifice, of not being able to do what they used to do, of not being able to hug family members or friends. But this is not the time to relax. The measures we are facing in weeks or months are going to be very difficult.
And we have more stories coming up after this very short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. This Thursday, a man wielding a knife outside a church in the southern French city of Nice killed 3 people and injured several others. The assailant was detained shortly afterwards by security forces. France's national anti-terror prosecutors said that they opened an inquiry for terrorism and murder. The city's mayor, Christian Etrosi, stated that the attacker kept repeating Allahu Akbar, which translates as God is great, even while under medication. The mayor added that the President Emmanuel Macron will be arriving shortly in Nice. The assault prompted lawmakers into parliament to hold a minute of silence before Prime Minister Jean Castex and other ministers abruptly left for an emergency meeting with President Emmanuel Macron.
Around 9 a.m., an individual entered the church, allegedly attacking the first person, a 70-year-old woman. I remind you that at 9 a.m. there was no religious service, so the Notre Dame Basilica was not entirely full. There were people inside, the faithful. A first victim had their throat slit by the perpetrator. A second individual, a man, died as a result of stab wounds by the assailant, who, on leaving, attacked a young woman in her 40s, who also died as a result of stab wounds by the terrorist.
Similar attacks took place simultaneously in Avignon and Saudi Arabia. In Avignon, local police killed the attacker while French security guards arrested the assailant nearby the French consulate in Jeddah. In the last week, France has been experiencing a climate of tension following the assassination of Professor Paty, which in turn was followed by a national debate on the limits of freedom of speech, Islamophobia, extremism, as well as international controversy between Paris and Ankara. Several European leaders have already condemned the attacks. At the same time, the extremist nationalist forces in France have unleashed their hatred against immigration of Islamic and Arab origin. On Thursday, 21 people have been killed and dozens more are feared dead after a typhoon tore through central Vietnam, triggering landslides and causing some of the worst destruction seen in years. Typhoon Molave hit villages as it made landfall a day earlier, tearing roofs from homes and bringing heavy rain to an area already badly affected by weeks of flooding. Hundreds of rescuers were desperately trying to reach survivors after several landslides, but many were hampered by thick mud and fallen trees. According to local media, 19 bodies have so far been pulled from the mud across 3 hard-hit villages in Quang Nam province. Authorities said another 45 people are believed to be buried in the area. On Thursday, Pakistani authorities implemented stronger health measures in a bid to prevent a second wave of COVID-19 cases as winter approaches. For months, Pakistan appeared to have dodged the worst of the pandemic, baffling health experts after fears its crowded urban areas and hospitals will be overrun. But cases have been steadily rising in recent weeks. Pakistani health officials unveiled a string of new measures, including mandatory mask orders in the country's major urban areas, lockdown in hotspots, and restrictions on some business operating hours. To date, Pakistan has confirmed more than 331,000 COVID-19 cases and over 6,700 deaths.
In Europe, if someone is not wearing a mask, he gets a heavy fine and the person must stay at home for 2 weeks. So if someone is not wearing it, he should be hit with at least 500 rupees. Only then will people obey, otherwise it is difficult to control them. If we go into a lockdown, we will waste our time like last time it happened. If the disease spikes, we will have to close the colleges again. In the next few months, our exams are coming up and if the situation remains the same, we will go into a lockdown again. meaning we will lose our academic year. Therefore, I would say we must wear a mask.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram, as well as our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.